Sorry if y'all hear my cat. Hi, everyone. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let me make sure this is, yes, it's recording. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Some of the things that we want folks to think about as they are engaging in this panel here today is just, like I said before, engage in whatever makes sense for you, what feels most comfortable. If you wanna use the chat, if you wanna unmute yourself, I think that that's gonna be really great with our small group here today. But for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Diana. I am one of the retention specialists in the AAC, and I coordinate our STEM Thrive program. And I'm gonna go ahead and hand it off to our panelists to introduce themselves here in the slides after I talk through the layout of today. All right, so a little bit about what to expect in this panel for engagement. Again, we encourage students to unmute themselves, to engage in conversation, to turn on their video if they're comfortable. If you need to step out for a little bit, that's okay. And if you want to turn your video off, if you need to do something, that's also okay. We encourage you all to use functions. This is also for panelists, like raising hands, reactions, using the chat box. Sometimes in our panels that we've had panelists ask other panelists questions to engage in more like in-depth conversations. So we encourage our panelists to also engage in that way as well with each other. And then really utilize this space and take advantage of this space to make connections with other folks, especially since we do have like, it's a peer-to-peer conversation here that we're facilitating. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our first panelist to introduce themselves through this slide. And then what we're going to do is like, we'll just go ahead and have folks introduce each other. Introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the questions after everyone introduces themselves through the slide, if that makes sense. All right, I'm going to hand it off.
Hi, my name is Julissa Rodriguez. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm majoring in ecosystem science and sustainability. I'm in my second year. I'm actually a transfer student, so I just transferred here last fall, 2020. And my career goals are to be involved in research that deals with ecology and climate change, and also create educational programs and initiatives in the future so that way I can reach a broader audience.
Thank you, Julissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew. I'm currently a fourth year student at CSU. I'm majoring in neuroscience with a minor in political science. My pronouns are he, him, and his. In the future, my career goals are to do graduate school, but specifically in pharmacology, but work eventually in fields related to drug development or drug discovery, and potentially work in the field of like pharmacovigilance. So, monitoring new drugs for, monitoring, safety profiles for new drugs, monitoring and seeing if there are any adverse effects associated with new drugs being developed. My hobbies, I enjoy hiking, running, reading books, hanging out with my family, and watching lots of Netflix in my free time. So yeah, that's all about me. So
I'm going to have a question for you later, but it might be about your Netflix show. Sorry, it might not.
No worries. Feel free to ask. Yeah, I love Netflix. So go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Matthew. So today we had a panelist that I cancel, but want to also acknowledge that Rain couldn't be here today, but wanted to share a little bit about herself. So here's a little bit about her for folks who maybe want to find a connection there with Rain. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Nicole.
So hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Sinaloa. My pronouns are she, hers, and her. My major is biomedical sciences, and I am a fourth year student. My career goals are research involving pathologies and drug development, as well as I'm still thinking of graduate school, and I'm still kind of thinking between either doing medical school or just doing something a little bit shorter, like a physician assistant program.
I like the little meme that you put in here, the SpongeBob.
Oh yeah, that happened a lot to us in the lab. We just learned that part of the learning experience is making mistakes, and that's totally okay, but sometimes you do kind of feel like that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing, Nicole. And I think that's a great segue that into our questions. So what I did is for all of our panel presentations, we always just prepare some questions ahead of time to help get us started. And then we want to just go from here. We don't have to stay in alignment with these questions, but we want to just help get the conversation started. So we'll just go ahead and start with like the first question here. And anyone can jump in at any time to answer. Not everyone has to respond to it, but we welcome folks to share a little bit. And then we also encourage our panelists to like engage and ask each other questions too. That would be helpful for our students who are engaging. And then we also, of course, we don't want to put the pressure on you as like our only student here. But if you have any questions too, like please jump in, use the chat box or unmute yourself whenever you feel like there's an opportunity or something that really intrigues you. So don't want to put the pressure on you since you're here, but let's go ahead and just get started with our first question. So the question that we have here to get us started is, how did you start getting involved with lab opportunities at CSU? And again, this is open for anyone.
The way that, I would, start getting involved in some lab opportunities at CSU is, I'd start by making some connections, getting to know some people, and really kind of getting involved in the process of reading about the research that the professor or faculty member who does who you want to work with. I think that before you reach out and you make that connection with whomever you're interested in working with, it's always important to kind of grow your knowledge a little bit when it comes to the research that they do. And when you go to meet with them, when you want to make that first connection, I'd always try to be asking questions about their research specifically. I'd be like, hey, this is a cool roundworm you're working on. Can I ask about it? Right. So I'd always say that, like, when it comes to getting involved in lab opportunities, step one is make sure that you're well informed about the researcher or the type of research that you're doing. And step two is, when you want to make that connection, really be asking pertinent questions about what they do, and show them that you're enthusiastic about it. And yeah, so those are my kind of two first things that you should do when making that first connection.
Thank you, Matthew. Does anyone else want to jump into this first question?
Yeah, I could add something. So I found the United in STEM lab intern position through Handshake, actually. And I applied because I was looking for a way to network with other students and kind of build more of a community. We've been online, and being a transfer student, it's kind of hard to build that community when you're just staring at a computer. So I really wanted to get that in-person interaction. So I applied, and I would recommend also, like, make sure that you have other like connections too. Like, I feel like I was able to get this job because I was a part of the AAC, and AAC was also a part of the lab internship. They were like kind of sponsoring it. I don't know the correct terms to use, but I felt like that definitely helped me. And previously I'd only been in labs in classes. So I would just recommend like going out there, trying it out, and see what you could get.
Thank you for sharing, Jalissa.
Yeah, kind of for me similar too. I'm a transfer student from a community college, so I didn't start to get involved in research until here at CSU, and definitely the United in STEM program. I learned about it from my AAC retention specialist, which is Diana, and she sent me out the email about this opportunity. So I also applied on it for it and through Handshake. So yeah, definitely during that program, we've learned so many skills that I think we can definitely transfer to a departmental lab position as we move forward.
Thank you, Nicole. I want to back up a little bit and realize that I didn't even start us off with a question for you all to share a little bit about like your experience in this specific lab with United in STEM. And so I'm wondering like, what would be the best way to capture that in a question? So let's just first start with our next question with you all sharing a little bit about your experience with the United in STEM lab position. So whatever feels like it stands out to you, whether it's like what was the biggest thing that you learned? How did you navigate the experience, whether it was your first lab experience or not, right? Like tell us a little bit about what that was like for you.
I could go first. I really did enjoy the lab experience. I know that personally, this is not something, so let me go back up. So in the lab, we were doing things like analyzing DNA, gel electrophoresis, and like extracting DNA, which is something that I'm not planning on doing in the future, but I thought I would try it out because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And the learning process about being in college is just trying things out and seeing if you actually like it. So even though I don't find myself doing that in the future, I really enjoyed learning about it. I feel like I have more expertise and different lab techniques that I could still continue to take with me in the future. And I also enjoyed getting the connections, like I mentioned before, having those people to talk to that I never talked to before and kind of networking in that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, in this lab experience, I think we definitely learned a lot of important lab techniques like diluting solutions, growing bacteria and collecting them, and sort of setting up experiments and knowing the procedures for them. But I think the biggest thing with this internship was usually when you go to your lab classes, you're kind of expected to do things more or so correctly. And if you mess up, you kind of just move forward. But with this lab, part of it was really them wanting us to make mistakes and to learn from them through repetition. So we really did, I feel like, obtain good mastery of most of the lab techniques that we learned in the lab, and also the connections there. We really had, I think, well, I feel like for me, and also for other of my peers in the lab, we made a good connection with both Dr. Edwards and Dr. Donko. They were just always there if you ever wanted advice about graduate school or about life or anything that didn't necessarily have to be related about the lab.
I would also, like to say similar things to, repeat kind of what Nicole and Julissa said. It was a good experience, and I enjoyed, learning about different techniques, like pipetting, aliquoting, PCR, and gel electrophoresis. It was cool, learning how to do like DNA extraction and, working with like proteins. It was a cool process, and I thought that, I learned a lot from that laboratory experience. And I think that the skills that we learn in there are certainly transferable to, a ton of different departmental lab positions. And they're even, quote unquote, soft skills, right? Like, learning how to communicate, learning how to work with other people in the lab, learning how to troubleshoot issues, learning how to teach somebody else some technique. I think that's, those are all soft skills, but, those are all pretty important when it comes to actually working in, some sort of departmental researcher laboratory position. So, yeah.
I think that's awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I heard a lot about like transferable skills, even if it felt like you didn't know if that was going to be applicable to like your career goals or things that you were specifically looking for, and a lot of support, especially when like being comfortable making mistakes. Because I mean, I don't have lab experience, but that sounds intimidating, right? Like, what does that look like for other folks who are wanting lab experience? I want to open it up to see if folks just want to ask questions within the group. If Anai, you have any questions for our panelists, if our panelists have any questions for each other about like their own individual experiences in the lab.
I do have a question. So how do you deal with like the mistakes that you make? For example, me as a person, I feel like sometimes I kind of like beat myself and I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough, or, but then, I kind of have to talk myself through it and be like, no, never mind, let me try again. Like, how did that look for you guys?
I can, yeah. So for me, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes, and I made mistakes, like, to be honest with you, there are definitely mistakes which were made, especially when I was experimenting. But I mean, I would always ask for help. That's the other thing, is whenever I was confused about something, I always ask for help. I asked Julissa for help a lot. Julissa was great at clarifying procedures. She was awesome at teaching me some stuff. I always ask my, I think, like, mentor, Dr. Noelle DeSala. She was also very helpful, and also Dr. Edwards. So, I mean, one thing that I would always deal with is, I was never afraid to ask for help or for extra clarification, because I think very often, it's hard to reach out and ask somebody for help whenever you're, troubleshooting issues or you feel like you're making a mistake. But really, don't feel afraid to reach out to people who, are in a position to kind of teach you, and help you grow through the process, because that's really the whole goal of the United in STEM program. So always reach out to people in the lab and ask them if there's stuff that can be corrected.
Does anyone else want to respond to Anais' question?
Yeah, definitely. Part of it, I think I've felt similar feelings whenever I've done lab classes. But it's the environment that the United in STEM program offers is like a very supportive, very caring, very open environment. So that if you ever did make a mistake or anything, it wasn't something that they would necessarily make you feel bad about. On the contrary, they would say, "Oh, this happens. This is perfectly natural." And they would and if you wanted to know how to do it correctly, they would be more than willing to show you how to do it. And we also learned that in departmental lab positions, there are tons of mistakes that are being done all the time. Um, that can happen. And also, like, when you're doing experiments, um, there can be like little errors that happen all the time, like equipment isn't sterilized or things like that. So things in the lab, for there to be mistakes, is perfectly normal. And it's just analyzing what went wrong and working to fix that and see if you get the results that you want to get.
I would kind of like to echo onto what my colleagues have said. I kind of feel how you were feeling, like sometimes I consider myself maybe a perfectionist, but what I really try to do for myself is change my thinking. I try to think this is actually a learning experience. Not everything is gonna be perfect, and that's the whole point. You want to learn how to do these things. You want to learn how to troubleshoot and stuff like that. And it's really about the mentality of it. Experiments are meant to go wrong so that way you could kind of figure out what went wrong and how to do it better in the future. There's no way that it could be perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing, and thank you, Anais, for the question. We can go into more questions from the group. We have other questions here that I think some of you all have already alluded to. The second question of like some of the things that you all gained from the United in STEM Lab intern experience that are going to help you all in like future opportunities. And also just want to jump into like what is like one piece of advice you would give to the students like yourself looking for lab experience. I know that United in STEM, the organization as a whole, is really dedicated to supporting students of color and like marginalized students in STEM opportunities. And so really want you all to share a little bit about like what piece of advice for other students who share similar identities with you all would you give to students who are looking for lab experience?
One piece of advice I would give is, I'd say, just generally speaking, don't be afraid to reach out. Like, you really got to put your foot in the door when it comes to looking for research opportunities, right? Like, you got to really put yourself out there. There's definitely, I've sent emails to people, whenever I was looking for summer research opportunities, different labs. I've sent emails and I've tried to put myself out there, and sometimes those people who work in those labs, faculty, staff, whoever, sometimes they'll say no, sometimes they'll say yes, right? But either way, I think one of the things that helps me the most is knowing that, I've really got to put 110% in always putting myself out there to meet them, right? Because, nobody's going to come get you. You got to go get them. You have to really put yourself out there, stick your foot in the door, and, be prepared to send your CV, send your resume. But again, just really be tenacious and putting yourself out there and communicating with those people who you want to work with or who you want to do research with in the future. So that's what I would say for sure.
I think Matthew said it perfectly. I would like to add on, don't be scared of rejection. I actually applied for 3 summer internships for this upcoming summer. I got denied to 2 of them, but I was able to secure one of them, and that's still a win. You're not going to get every single thing, but it doesn't hurt to put yourself out there and try to look for those things. And so that's what I would advise.
Yeah, I think both Jules and Matthew covered everything. Definitely just really putting yourself out there and knowing that rejection is natural in these kinds of things. You won't always get yeses. I mean, you won't always get yeses, but it's perfectly fine. You just gotta keep looking, because eventually you will find something that you can get involved with.
Thank you all. Want to open it up again to see if other folks just want to ask each other questions about the lab experience. If Anai, you have any other questions for our panelists here and their experience with the United in STEM lab experience, even if it's about United in STEM specifically? What is United in STEM? Does anyone want to share what United in STEM is?
For me, I did have a quick comment, and it was just, I like how that you guys worded about, like, you know, having your foot in and, you know, looking for these opportunities, because I feel like that might discourage a lot of people. Like if you get rejected, you know, or you get people that just don't try hard enough, or maybe they just give up. So I really like that, because, you know, you have to look for the opportunities rather than the opportunities looking for you. So I'm glad you guys mentioned that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add in, I mean, you know, again, like, you know, I've applied for summer research fellowships and internships before, and I've gotten rejected like dozens of times for sure. It happens a lot, and people, that's going to happen. But again, you know, you really just got to keep being tenacious and just keep coming at it and just keep going for it. And eventually, you know, you'll secure, you know, a good like research position for yourself. Just, you got to keep up and keep going. So.
Does anyone want to speak in regards to what United in STEM is? Does anyone feel comfortable talking a little bit about that for anyone who's engaging in this recording might not know?
So I think broadly speaking, United in STEM, not necessarily the laboratory experience, but the whole program is kind of, from what I know, is just kind of geared towards supporting underrepresented students or students of color in STEM disciplines. So kind of supporting a broad range of students from diverse backgrounds and kind of helping them find opportunities for, I guess, further growth and, you know, self-development in STEM fields.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And you'll
Yeah.
see a lot of United in STEM information in our newsletters for any events, other events that they're planning, if they open up any other opportunities. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We'll always include that. And we actually have some AAC staff who are part of the committee and the organization to help plan for those things. And so our AAC students will always know about opportunities, upcoming opportunities for United in STEM if you want to learn a little bit more about them. And they also have a website dedicated to United in STEM if you want to look into that a little bit more. I want to be mindful of folks' time, but just want to see if there's anything else that you all want to add into the space or want to share in regards to your experience or providing advice for other students who are looking for lab experience.
In particular, I'd like to share some things. If you're looking for like summer research experience, there's a lot of websites that you could look at. So one website you could look at is AMCAS, American Medical Colleges Association. There's like listings of different summer opportunities. You can look at the NSF website, National Science Foundation. They fund a lot of programs called REUs, or Research Experience for Undergraduates. So those are also out there as well. NIH, National Institutes of Health, has a lot of websites. ASPET, American Society for Pharmacology and Therapeutics, has web opportunities. So I just want to let people know that like there's a lot of like resources you could look at if you're looking for those kinds of like summer research opportunities. There's also Pathways to Science. So that's another really great website to look at. But just want to like put my 2 cents out there if you're looking for summer stuff. There's a lot to look into for sure. So
That's awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Anything else anyone else wants to add?
Yeah, I want to add something. I would also recommend that if you think you may like something, I would recommend actually trying it, because you would never really know if you do like it until you try it. And so just like how I mentioned, I didn't know that I wouldn't like necessarily doing gel electrophoresis and analyzing DNA and stuff, but I never would have known unless I tried it. So that's something I would recommend.
Yeah, that's something great. Yeah, great piece of advice. Thank you, Jalissa. Awesome. Yes, I think that this is, I think, a great way to get folks in the conversation to consider thinking about opportunities and kind of like where to get started. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about your experience, specifically with this lab, with United in STEM, how you've engaged with other lab experiences for summer research experiences, including platforms to use, tips. And that's all really great for our students to engage with. And so I want to thank you all for being here. I don't have any other questions, and I know that we've had already some questions tossed around. So we want to make sure that if folks want to connect with any of our panelists, just please send me an email, and you can find my contact information online if you want to connect with any of our panelists who are all AAC students. So really want to give a huge shout out to our panelists who are here today. So please send me an email if you're wanting to connect with any of our students here. Hopefully that's okay with you all as panelists, if folks are wanting to connect with you one-on-one. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.